Alexander the Great, hailed for his extraordinary accomplishments and triumphs, stands as an immortal figure in history. But what sets him apart and makes him one of the greatest men to have ever lived? As we journey through the annals of time, we encounter a shroud of mystery enveloping his final year of life. In this captivating video, we embark on a quest to unearth the secrets of the Macedonian conquest's last chapter. Delving into the events that led to the enigmatic death of the Macedonian king, we'll uncover his enduring legacy and the clandestine intrigues behind his tragic end. Who was Alexander the Great? Alexander III of Macedon, better known as Alexander the Great, was one of the most exceptional and influential military commanders in history. His conquest had a significant impact on the ancient world, resulting in an empire that stretched from Greece to India. He earned a reputation for his brilliant and bold military strategies. Born in Pella, a city in the political center of Macedonia, in the summer of 356 BC, he was the son of Olympias of Epirus and the great Philip II. From his childhood, he was taught by the best tutors. Among all the teachers and tutors of the great Alexander, none was more famous and important than the great Aristotle, who made sure that he was well educated in history, literature, geography, mathematics, ethics, politics, philosophy, and medicine. Along with such a complete education, his childhood was also influenced by a strong physical training. It is said that his father, King Philip II, hired the famous Spartan warrior Leonidas to train him in martial arts and military strategy. As Alexander grew older, he also learned about the government and administration of the kingdom, preparing him for his future role as a military and political leader. But his education did not stop there. During his military campaigns, Alexander also became a student of the world, learning about the customs and cultures of the people he conquered. Alexander the Great possessed theoretical and practical knowledge that enabled him to become one of the most successful military leaders in history and to leave a lasting legacy on the world. The year 336 BC was a pivotal year in his life, as a conspiracy led to the assassination of the great Philip II. As a result, the young Alexander the Great, only 20 years old, became king of Macedonia upon the death of his father. Despite his youth, he had an insatiable appetite for conquest and a bold vision to expand his kingdom, and throughout his short life. With the support of his loyal generals and soldiers, Alexander launched a series of daring military campaigns. He encountered and defeated numerous powerful empires and kingdoms, including the Persian Empire, the Egyptian Empire, and the Indian subcontinent. In the battle, Alexander demonstrated his military brilliance, charismatic leadership, and determination to achieve his goals. As a courageous warrior, he won the loyalty and inspiration of his men to follow him to the ends of the earth. Alexander the Great's ambitions were as great as his legacy. From his youth, his goal was to surpass his father, King Philip II, and expand his empire beyond known borders. With brilliant strategies on the battlefield and unparalleled courage, Alexander led his army across unknown lands, conquering territories from Greece to Egypt and Persia and even reaching India. During his relatively short reign of just over a decade, he waged numerous campaigns and fought many battles. The Battle of Issus. November 333 BC. Being only 23 years old, Alexander defeated the Persian king Darius III, securing his control over the eastern Mediterranean. Alexander chose to take a risky move by marching his army through the narrow coastal plain between the Mediterranean Sea and the Amanus Mountains, which allowed him to bypass the Persian army's fortified position and flank them from the rear. He deployed his army in a phalanx formation, with his infantry in the center, flanked by cavalry on either side. Alexander led a fierce attack on the Persian center with his elite infantry, the Macedonian phalanx, while the Macedonian cavalry engaged the Persian cavalry on the flanks. This attack caused the Persian center to break and flee. Alexander pursued the fleeing Persian center, while his cavalry continued to engage and defeat the Persian flanks. During the battle, Darius III's family, including his mother, wife, and children, were captured by Alexander, which caused Darius to flee the battlefield. Siege of Tyre, 332 BC. The Battle of Tyre was a pivotal conflict during Alexander the Great's conquest of the Persian Empire. Tyre was a powerful city located on an island off the coast of modern-day Lebanon, and its strategic location made it a significant obstacle for Alexander's armies as they moved towards Egypt. To capture the city, Alexander first attempted to build a causeway across the water to the island, but the Tyrians resisted fiercely and destroyed his efforts. Undeterred, Alexander then used a combination of naval and land forces to blockade the city and cut off its supply lines. Despite the Tyrians' determined defense and the difficulty of the terrain, Alexander's forces eventually breached the city's defenses. Alexander's engineers constructed siege engines and battering rams to break through the city's walls, while his soldiers fought valiantly in close combat to secure the breach. After a grueling 7-month siege, Tyre fell to Alexander's forces. The city was sacked, and its inhabitants were either killed or sold into slavery. The Battle of Tyre demonstrated Alexander's strategic prowess and his willingness to persevere against seemingly insurmountable obstacles. It also marked a significant turning point in his campaign, as it opened the way for his further conquests in the Near East. The Battle of Gaugamela, fought in October 331 BC, is considered one of the greatest and most decisive in the career of Alexander the Great. In this battle, he led his Macedonian army against the Persian king Darius III, whose forces outnumbered Alexander's, composed of infantry, cavalry, and war elephants. Despite a clear numerical disadvantage, Alexander used a bold and well-planned strategy to engage the Persian forces. He divided his army into 3 sections, with himself leading the central section, and advanced in a diagonal formation that allowed his troops to surround and overrun the Persian forces. The battle was long and fierce, fought on a battlefield full of natural obstacles and traps set by the Persians. But Alexander managed to defeat the Persian forces and secure his control over the Persian Empire. It was the result of his strategic skill, bravery, and effective leadership. This battle became a milestone in his career and cemented his reputation as one of the greatest military leaders in history. In addition, this victory secured Alexander's control of the Persian Empire and paved the way for his conquest of other territories. The conquest of Bactria, 329 BC. Alexander the Great undertook a campaign in this region, in what is now Afghanistan. This campaign was one of the most difficult and bloody of his career. He began his march into the region of Bactria with an army of approximately 40,000 men, and it was marked by treachery and fierce resistance from the local warriors. The conquest of Bactria was complicated by the difficult geography of the terrain and the fierce resistance of the local warriors. Alexander with his army faced a series of bloody battles and guerrilla strategies from the Bactrians, led by the fierce warrior Oxyartes. Throughout the campaign, Alexander demonstrated his skill as a leader and strategist, adapting to his opponent's tactics and using them to his advantage. At a critical point in the campaign, Alexander used the stratagem of faking his own death to confuse the Bactrians and surprise them with an attack. Despite the difficulties, Alexander managed to conquer Bactria after a year of war. However, the campaign was costly in human lives and drained the resources of his army. The conquest of Bactria is considered one of the most challenging campaigns of Alexander the Great's career, and it demonstrated his courage and determination as a leader and conqueror, and enabled him to further expand his empire. The Battle of the Hydaspes was fought in 326 BC. In this battle, Alexander defeated the Indian king Porus, securing his control over the northern Indian subcontinent. The Hydaspes River was a major obstacle for Alexander as he advanced further into India, and King Porus had positioned his forces on the opposite bank, ready to defend against the Macedonian army. Alexander was a master tactician, and he knew how to take advantage of his enemy's weaknesses. He divided his army into 3 parts, with one group attacking the Indian left flank, one attacking the center, and one crossing the river to attack the Indian right flank from behind. This surprised Porus and caused his forces to become disorganized, allowing Alexander's troops to gain the upper hand. The Macedonian army was well equipped with advanced weapons such as long spears, swords, and javelins, as well as well-trained soldiers who were skilled in close combat. This gave them an advantage over the Indian army, which was largely made up of infantry and cavalry. King Porus had a large number of war elephants, which he deployed against the Macedonian army. However, Alexander was able to counter this by using his own elephants, which had been trained to be immune to the Indian elephant's charge. This allowed Alexander's troops to engage the Indian infantry and cavalry without being overwhelmed by the elephants. Alexander was known for his use of psychological warfare, and he employed this tactic during the Battle of the Hydaspes as well. He made a show of personally leading his troops into battle, which had a demoralizing effect on the Indian soldiers who were not used to seeing their own king on the battlefield. Additionally, he ordered his troops to chant and sing loudly as they advanced, which created an intimidating atmosphere for the enemy. He was also a visionary leader and a great patron of the arts and sciences. His reign marked a turning point in history, ushering in a new era of cultural exchange and a fusion of ideas between the Greek, Persian, and Egyptian cultures. He also sought to unite the people he conquered, and he promoted the mixing of cultures and religions to create a more unified and peaceful society. Alexander the Great's ambitions were as great as his adventurous spirit, and his vision of a united world under his leadership left a lasting impact on history. The Last Deed. Alexander the Great's last year in power was a time of great strife and mystery, as the legendary leader found himself in the midst of a series of conflicts and conspiracies that threatened his life and legacy. Despite his successes as a ruler and conqueror, his final reign was threatened by the betrayal of his own followers and the uncertainty of what would happen after his death. There were a series of events that ultimately led to his untimely death. In November 324 BC, Alexander's closest friend and confidant, Hephaestion, died suddenly at Ecbatana. Hephaestion's death deeply affected Alexander, who ordered a funeral in his honor and sank into sadness and depression for weeks. The conspiracy of the pages was an assassination attempt against Alexander the Great, which was carried out in 324 BC. The leaders of the plot were a group of young men in the Persian army under the supervision of Alexander and his generals. It is believed that the conspiracy was motivated by the pages' resentment and dissatisfaction with Alexander's regime, as well as the influence of some members of the Persian nobility who sought to regain their power and position in the empire. When the conspiracy was discovered, Alexander felt betrayed by those he considered his protégés and allies. He ordered the execution of the conspiracy's leaders and conducted a purge of the army, dismissing hundreds of officers and soldiers suspected of involvement in the plot. Although Alexander was not directly involved in the page conspiracy, his role in suppressing it was crucial to his survival and consolidation of power. The conspiracy demonstrated that even those closest to him could be disloyal and ambitious, increasing his paranoia and distrust of his followers and contributing to his decision to name a successor before his death. As Alexander fought the last rebellions in Persia, he became embroiled in a series of intrigues and conspiracies that further destabilized his weakening empire. Political infighting among his generals and growing distrust of his own allies led him to take drastic measures to secure his legacy. In 324 BC, Alexander held a mass wedding ceremony in Susa, Persia, in which he married several hundred of his soldiers to Persian women. It became known as the Wedding of the East and West. This was part of his efforts to create a unified empire, and it marked a significant departure from his previous policies of treating the Persians as conquered subjects. Later that year, Alexander fell seriously ill after a drinking party, and some historians speculate that he may have been poisoned. However, there is no conclusive evidence to support this theory. Despite his illness, Alexander continued to lead his army on a grueling march across the desert, in which many of his soldiers died from exhaustion and thirst. After his recent victory in India, he began to suffer from fevers and weakness. In Babylon, his health deteriorated rapidly. Illness of Alexander the Great is one of history's mystery, with many theories about the cause of his illness, from lead poisoning to malaria, spreading rumors throughout the empire. Some historians have even speculated that he may have been poisoned. What is certain is that his illness had a profound effect on his life and legacy. As he grew weaker, his empire began to fragment, with this mysterious illness leading to his death at an early age, and his sudden death sparking a power struggle among his generals that ultimately led to the downfall of his empire. What is certain is that the illness of Alexander the Great remains a fascinating mystery, and its impact on history is a sign of the fragility of power in human life. In the spring of 323 BC, Alexander returned to Babylon, where he fell ill again and died on June 10th at the age of 32. The cause of his death remains a mystery, but some theories include malaria, typhoid fever, or alcohol poisoning. Alexander's death sparked a power struggle among his top generals, known as the Diadochi, or successors. The empire was eventually divided into several smaller kingdoms, with each general ruling over a portion of Alexander's former territory. This period is known as the Hellenistic era, and it lasted until the Roman conquest of Greece in 146 BC. It was marked by significant cultural and political developments, including the rise of Greek philosophy, the spread of Hellenistic culture, and the emergence of new centers of power, such as Pergamum and Alexandria. The battles for power. Meanwhile, Alexander's generals begin to intrigue for power. They know that when the king dies, the struggle to succeed him will be fierce. The two main contenders are Perdiccas, Alexander's closest general, and Craterus, a leading military strategist. Other generals, such as Ptolemy, who would later found the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, also wanted a piece of the action. After the death of Alexander the Great, a series of epic power struggles ensued that shook the ancient world. Generals and leaders of various military factions vied for control of the vast empire Alexander had so painstakingly built. The power struggles were a mix of political alliances, assassinations, betrayals, and bloody battles. The most ambitious generals sought to establish their own kingdoms, often at the expense of their former allies and friends. Territories once united under Alexander's command were divided into several kingdoms, each ruled by a general who claimed the right to rule. But the struggle for power did not end there. Tensions and conflicts between the rival kingdoms continued for decades, as rulers fought epic battles for control of the empire. Although some generals managed to establish lasting dynasties, the world would never be the same after the death of Alexander the Great. In short, the power struggles that followed the death of Alexander the Great are an epic tale of ambition, betrayal, and sacrifice in a world that would never be the same. By the time Alexander the Great knew his time was running out, he gathered his generals and told them of his legacy. He asked to hold his empire together and not allow it to fragment. But even on his deathbed, Alexander the Great is larger than life. His last words are, "To my closest friend, the strongest." No one knows to whom he is referring, but everyone knows that with his death, the world has lost a great man. The emperor who promoted education and progress. Alexander the Great had great respect for Greek education and culture, and sought to promote learning and literature throughout his empire. He founded libraries and academies in many of his cities, employing some of the leading philosophers and scientists of the day. The last year of Alexander the Great was also marked by his efforts to unify politically and culturally the vast territories he had conquered during his lifetime. For although Greece had been divided into several warring city-states for centuries, he sought to unite the Greeks under a single government. He founded the League of Corinth, an alliance of Greek city-states that united under his leadership, and joined his campaign against Persia. During this time, Alexander was particularly interested in establishing an effective administration and a system of government that could maintain the unity of his empire after his death. One of the ways in which Alexander sought to unify his empire was through the founding of these new cities, many of which were named after him. These cities were important centers of commerce and culture that promoted the integration of the various cultures that inhabited Alexander's empire. In addition, Alexander promoted the adoption of Greek culture throughout the empire, including Greek education and the spread of the Greek language. Another way Alexander sought to unify his empire was through a policy of dynastic marriage. During his lifetime, Alexander married several Persian princesses and took wives from the royal families of the territories he conquered. These marriages helped to create political and cultural alliances between different territories and royal families. He also reorganized his army to better reflect the diversity of the cultures he was conquering. He created mixed units of Macedonian and Persian soldiers, which helped create a more cohesive and unified force. He also worked to improve the infrastructure of Greece, building roads and bridges to facilitate trade and travel. He also improved fortifications in Greek cities to protect them from invaders. He oversaw the construction of a network of roads and bridges throughout his empire, which facilitated the movement of his troops and communication between different regions. These roads also allowed for more efficient and faster trade, which helped strengthen the empire's economy. As part of his strategy to control the regions he conquered, Alexander the Great ordered the fortification of several key cities. These fortifications included high walls and strong watchtowers, which allowed Macedonian troops to defend against attacks by rebels and enemy forces. He accompanied and supervised the construction of several ports and shipyards in the coastal cities, which allowed the Macedonians to expand their trade and naval power. These ports were also used for the construction and repair of ships, ensuring Macedonian control over maritime trade routes. To provide water for cities and fortifications, Alexander the Great ordered the construction of aqueducts and irrigation systems. These improvements allowed for greater food production and a better quality of life for city dwellers. In summary, the last year of Alexander the Great's reign was not only marked by his campaigns in Asia and power struggles within his own empire, but he also implemented significant reforms in Greece that helped strengthen Macedonian control over the conquered regions and allowed for more efficient trade and a better quality of life for the inhabitants of the empire. Alexander the Great's last year was marked by significant events that ultimately shaped the course of ancient history. While his early death left many questions unanswered, his legacy as one of the greatest conquerors and military commanders of all time continues to be studied and celebrated to this day. Alexander the Great's rise to power is a story of courage, ambition, and extraordinary leadership that has inspired people around the world for centuries. Yet despite these efforts, Alexander's empire did not survive long after his sudden death at the age of 32, shrouded in rumors of poisoning and betrayal, left an immense void in the ancient world and marked the end of an era of conquest and power. The power struggles among his generals and the lack of a clear successor caused the empire to fragment, and the cities Alexander founded eventually became separate cultural and political centers. Alexander the Great's last year was a turbulent time in the history of the ancient world. The struggle for power and the warrior king's legacy led to intrigue and conspiracy. Although his reign was short, Alexander the Great's influence on history and culture continues to this day. His legacy continues to inspire and captivate people around the world, and his name remains synonymous with greatness and power. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, press the bell icon so you never miss a new documentary.